Hello, everyone. Hello, Marie. Taylor, where's the cats? Saw the picture. Where's the cats?
They are hiding now. So.
What's up, Dino?
Hey, how's it going? My cats are sleeping, which I think is the smarter choice.
Well, I'm in the office, so I have no idea what the current state of our cats is. I'm gonna let folks join in, and I'll say a few things at the beginning, but mostly this is intended to be sort of a free-form Q&A. Just say hi to. We've got a number of the essays here because I see Percy, I see Elena, I see Josh, I see Jim. We've got a fair fraction of Keck folks here.
Little breakout session here.
And Brad, Holden, and Taylor can talk about exciting things like flexure compensation for potential new Cassegrain instruments. It could be a throwdown. But for those who don't know me or us, or may have only met some of us over the course of your observing run. So I'm John, I'm the chief scientist here. And when I look at the Brady Bunch diagram, I'll have Jim introduce himself real quick. And for the essays, if you don't mind saying, which instruments you're responsible for babysitting and keeping happy, or any of the other key things that you're working on, in case people have specific questions. Hi, Rebecca. Jim, go for it.
Thank you, Don. I'm Jim Like. I'm an astronomer at Keck, and I'm also the lead for AO operations. So I got to keep AO, Cyrus, and ESI working. And I've been a past master or secondary for several other instruments as well.
Next up, Josh Wallowender.
Hey everyone, I'm Josh Wallowender. I'm another one of the Keck staff astronomers. I'm the instrument scientist for MOSFire, and I also keep our remote observing capabilities going. That's the other part of my duties.
All right. I'm going to speak on behalf of Percy, who apparently just had dental surgery and is only passively listening. So Percy, I hope you are at least listening somewhat comfortably. Elena.
There you go. I'm Elena Manjabacas. I'm staff astronomer at Keck too. I support MOSFire, HIRES, and LRIS. So if you have the forum to observe with any of those instruments, you might have it. You might have me as an essay, at least for the next month.
Yeah, Elena is not mentioning the fact that she's headed off to Space Telescope soon. So if you've got a MOSFire, HIRES, or LRES run in the next week and a half, maybe you'll.
Otherwise, you might see me with James Webb Space Telescope, which is what I'm gonna do next time when I'm working for the NIRSPEC team.
Randy Campbell.
Hi everyone, I'm Randy Campbell. I lead the observing support department, which includes the staff astronomers and the observing assistants, and I try to manage the science operation in as efficient and high performance ways as possible. I also still do a little bit of night support so I can stay active in that, but it's mostly with the adaptive optics instruments, OSIRIS and NERC2. Thanks.
Thanks, Randy. So I think the purpose of this session was really to just give folks a chance to chat with Keck staff. Oh, wait, we got one more Keck staff to introduce. Carlos, if you want to just unmute and say which instruments you're responsible for and various things you're working on.
Okay, yeah, so I'm Carlos Alvarez. I am the instrument scientist for DEMOS and also for NERC2. And yeah, recently I've been mostly focused on an upgrade that we've done to the DEMOS instrument with a new rotator computer, new rotator controller, new instrument server. So that's basically the most recent thing that I've been doing lately.
Thanks, Carlos. So yeah, the whole thought here was to just have a chance to interact with some of us, especially if you've only observed once or twice with us and have only seen a couple of people. If you want to have any fun questions about day in the life of a staff astronomer, we've got a number of staff astronomer positions open right now. So if you're potentially interested in one of those, you might want to ask some questions here. You can ask really boring science policy questions of me or things like that. But I think we've got enough people in the room that I might just use the hands up feature if you had a question or something you wanted to talk about. But and Jessica Lou already has her hands up. So go ahead, Jessica, go ahead.
I want to know how the essays feel about pajama mode observing.
I want the essays to answer, and then you can ask John how he feels about pajama mode observing.
I personally love it for myself, but it's an additional hurdle keeping it all going. Josh has a lot more details on it.
I can.
But it's very convenient to wake up and log in and then go back to bed.
It's also helpful if you have kids. You can easy to take a quick break and read a bedtime story to my daughter and then jump back on while I'm supporting. Can't do that when you're at headquarters.
And Greg, since you just joined, I'm asking any of the Keck staff to just identify themselves, say what instruments or what their role is real quick. So for those who don't know.
Okay. Oh yeah, so I'm Greg Dotman. I'm responsible for NurSpec, high-res are the primary instruments. I support others as well. KCWI, high-res, or AO. Can't remember the rest of them, but anyway, mostly NurSpec and high-res are my big ones.
And the amazing Shelly Pelfrey is also here. So Shelly, I want you to say hi. And we should all give Shelly a huge shout out for basically making every of these electronic interactions you've had possible, because she's been spending the last month or so figuring out how to pull off a 400-person conference over Zoom and Slack. So Shelly, you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Shelly Pelfrey, otherwise known as Jerry Nelson Conference Room in this instance here. I am the outreach coordinator for Keck Observatory and John's handler, and Mark's too, if he's here.
I think Mark's over at WFI. So thanks, Shelly. Did any of the other essays want to chime in on pajama mode? Because we had Jessica's question about what their thoughts are on pajama mode.
Yeah, I have some comments on that, if I may.
Go for it.
Yeah, I think there are trade-offs. There's pluses and minuses. Obviously, the convenience, the ability to include more people on the observing run, and there might even be some efficiency gains and some other things that are a little easier. But I also feel like going more virtual is really missing out on some vital experience, especially for early career people. I mean, Jessica, you asked the question, and you think about some of your experiences in the observing room at Keck over the years with, the whole group there, and seeing the Keck staff in person and getting to know the observatory firsthand. I hope we don't completely lose that. We could keep some of that going. That is one of the goals of the Keck Visiting Scholar program too, is to bring out early career scientists and get them directly experiential, time with instruments, with the operation, with the Keck staff, and to maybe even consider an observatory type career. So maybe we can work around it a little bit, because obviously I think some form of PJ mode is here to stay. We're starting to have to accept that, I think. So that's.
Yeah, so I'll jump in on that. You know, when all of this started, obviously it came on in a very unplanned way. It was kind of a big burden for us to manage. I mean, the process that you all are using to log in from home for your observing nights, that was not designed for you guys to do from home. That was designed with official remote sites in mind. And, you know, that process, we had planned to be executing that once or twice a year to bring new sites online. We ended up executing it multiple times per day in order to bring observers online for their nights. So that was a big deal. But, you know, it was a trial by fire, but we got it down to the point where we're actually executing it pretty efficiently now. So it started off as a really huge burden for the SA group to just take this on. And it's kind of evened out, which is nice. But one thing I'm curious about is, if I can turn the question around on you guys, as observers, what do you think of the observing from home? Is it, you know, not as good as the experience from a site? Is it just as good and there's no difference? Like, you know, what do you guys see?
I don't dare to try it. This is Imke. I cannot see how you can do, I mean, usually you have 3 or 4 of these big screens, and now you do it on a laptop. I just can't imagine how that works.
Yeah, we encourage people to have multiple screens if at all possible, even if it's, you know, sitting with your laptop and plugging it into your TV for at least a second screen. But that is probably the biggest limitation that we see.
Yeah, Imka, I don't know if you saw Hilton's talk, but when he said Keck's back on Sky and showed a picture in his very first slide, that was a slide of my guest bedroom with my laptop hooked up to the TV that I, you know, stuck to the wall, and the other monitor and the bags of food. So yeah, it's a little bit Frankenstein's monster in terms of how we do it.
I cannot see myself doing that. so I'm glad that at least in Berkeley we can still go to the remote ops rooms. Plus we need, I mean, for some of the rooms we need both telescopes, and so you want to talk to the other person, which and is in another room, but that's better than whatever else.
I actually have a related question. So now you guys have lifted the rules for going to the headquarters for first-time users of a certain instrument. Do you plan to resume that? Like, if someone has already used that in pajama mode, do we need to go to headquarters once the lockdown has been lifted?
That's a good question. I don't think I have an answer to it yet. I can tell you where I'm leaning, but I don't want to create policy on the fly, Marie. I think if you've used an instrument and if there weren't major issues, it's something we could talk about, but I don't want to create policy on the fly. Okay. Taylor, I think you had your hand up.
Yeah, no, I was also answering Josh's question. I understand the remote thing, and I've done it before, and it's definitely doable. I think the multiple screens is incredibly important. I just really miss, it's gonna hurt to not be the in-person thing, just because I very much am a social creature in that way, and I learn best when in person with people, and I learn something new every time I observe with Keck. And so it's gonna be a shame to not be able to be like in the same room as the essays and everyone else, get espresso and, you know.
Well, to be clear, once we can open the travel restrictions, we will open the travel restrictions. Yeah, sure. This is not a permanent solution. I think when Randy said at some level it's here to stay, I think it's because in many ways the genie's out of the bottle for the capability to be there. But I am very, very much looking forward to being able to have people back here at the observatory observing once we can get the travel going. Because the espresso machine is sad, Taylor. It's sitting there. It's sad and it's lonely. Brad, you got your hands up.
I have about 20 questions.
No, okay, go for it.
But the one I was actually curious about, and this is very inside baseball, is that Hilton said that supporting the pajama mode. Actually, question one: can we call it something else? Anyway, supporting the observing from at home, as I am the only person that refers to it as such, it takes a lot of effort from the support astronomers. And at Lake, I feel like we've gotten to the point where it doesn't take a lot of support. So I'm curious why, you know, we have a much smaller community. We have the same people observing all the time. So that makes it much easier for us. Is it just training people up and the sort of installing all the software and all that kind of overhead that's so expensive?
Well, I'm gonna let Josh answer it in detail, but the short answer to what you just said is yes, because you have multiple operating system / versions of Python configuration / is my SSH key appropriate / do I have the VNC thing configured correctly in the YAML, and then you get weird edge cases like, you know, I want to run it on my Apple Watch in Latvia. Can I do that? But once you've kind of run through the iteration with the community, the first time, then the second time and third time, it's a bit easier. Josh, do you want to speak to it in more detail?
Yes, but first I'm going to say you're not alone. I also don't like the pajama mode name. I always put at home observing parenthesis PJ mode. But yeah, it's pretty much what John said. Once the observer and observing team, in many cases, is set up and configured and connected and on Zoom, it's mostly the same. It's just that initial, you know, potential barrier to getting going is what costs the time. Once they're connected to Zoom and to the VNC, it's pretty much the same for us.
Are the settings, this is Chaz, are the settings sticky? So you have the same, you know, SSH keys from one session to the next, or once you've done it once, you should be able to just go again?
Yes. So
yes.
People who are observing for the second time, it tends to be almost no barrier.
Chaz, we are working on some new backend stuff, mostly for security considerations, but we want it to be even more turnkey, not less so going forward. Carrie, Brad, I'll come back to you because I know you've got a lot of questions, but I'm going to bounce it around. Carrie, I think you had your hand up.
Yes, I was just going to comment on the observing at home mode to say, although I kind of also agree, although it is a nice option to have in case you can't go in or if there was a TOO that you needed to trigger, I definitely prefer observing in an actual observing room. And at least at Sierra, we've been very lucky that we happened to get our remote observing room up and running just before COVID and everything happened. So whenever we've had to go observe, we could use that, because just having to deal with, you know, having the multiple screens, being able to put everything in the right place, connecting to Zoom is quite a bit of a hassle. So I would hate to try and do that at home with my laptop and try to figure out things out on that side.
Thanks, Carrie. I noticed that Arena has joined us. Arena, I'm asking anybody who is from Keck to just unmute and introduce yourself real quick.
Thanks, John, for calling me out. Now I'm one of the observing assistants at Keck.
Hi, Irina. So let's see. Do I see any other hands? I don't, so I'll punt it back to Brad. Brad, what's next in your rapid fire question hour?
So the next one I wanted to ask was, what was the Cryo Crisis?
Oh, the Cryo Crisis was, and I'm guessing as to the origin, but it's probably right, that so we get our cryo from air gas, and air gas, their primary reason why they are here is to make cryogens and gas for the medical industry or for healthcare. And so because of the uptick in COVID, there was a need for medical grade oxygen that diverted their use of their facilities to create cryo. And so they employed a force majeure that meant we were unable to get the amount of cryo that we wanted. So we were looking at which instruments we would have to warm up when and how to do that with the least impact on the schedule. Fortunately, Airgas restarted their production over on Oahu, or is it Oahu or Hilo? But the good news is that we got 10 beautiful doers last week, and the other piece of good news, I think, in a longer term sense, is that This wasn't our first dance with doing this, in the sense that when we had the shutdown before, we had to very seriously look at how to deal with cryo shortages. And after the shutdown, put more into reserves so that, for example, we really, really don't ever want high res to warm up because of what would happen with the detector there and the things that we have to do. So we have what I call the first national bank of high res, which is, the extra 170 that we've got there. And, every time something like this happens, we learn lessons about stuff. And so I anticipate that we're going to be looking into other things to try to mitigate the potential impacts of, because you never know when the company's going to call up and say, we just don't feel like it, which is not what happened. But the point is that we want to be resilient to issues like that. But that's what it was. There was just a short-term stoppage in delivery cryo from Airgas because they were diverting their production to other things.
Yeah, well, you don't know how exciting it can be. We used to have to wait for helium to come from the mainland when we were working with our little single detector array, single element arrays and bolometers. So we would take the truck down and wait for individual flights to arrive so we could run the helium up and fill up the dewars. Because the pilots often wouldn't take the helium at all. They thought it was hissing and dangerous. So you'd wait at the drive-in and drive up.
A very fun story, which I don't have the time to tell now, is how they kept JWST cold when it was in Chamber A at Johnson and Hurricane Harvey hit Texas.
Mm-hmm.
That's a fun one involving the CEO of Airgas and a couple of frantic phone calls. So, but that's a different telescope and a different story for a different time.
Wow.
Any other questions?
I just got my, this is Merrill Butler. I just got my answer, looks like from the chat room. And I was asking a question about the highest magnitude that the Keck instrument can see for the purpose of delineating a radial velocity. And it says that under the best scenario, California Planet Search have produced 2 meters uncertainties for stars as faint as 13.0.
Yeah, and that will change when KPF is delivered. We'll have an increase in sensitivity, especially for redder stars.
And so when would that be, would you say?
KPF will be delivered in late 21, available for science in 2022.
Oh, cool. Okay.
I will encourage you to, sorry, I was going to say, I would just encourage you to continue to talk with, say, Howard or some other radial velocity expert, because you can't get that precision for any generic star at 13th magnitude.
Yeah.
Mm.
You have to have the high line density, so you want cooler stars with lots of transitions in the rest frame optical.
Yeah.
Okay.
Rapid rotators are a nightmare. Well, you don't measure anything sensible, for example.
Right. Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Carrie, you've got your hand up again. Muted.
I lowered my hand, but then forgot to unmute myself. Thanks, John. Yeah, I wanted to ask another question. So you answered my question. Thank you very much about the farms to families outreach opportunity, all the activity that you guys had participated in. Has there been any thought to doing other things similar, like community gardens and stuff like that?
There has been a lot of thought around a lot of things in terms of community, and the idea of Keck working in the community is not new. We've been doing it for decades. I think Farms to Families was a specific response to the food insecurity issue that hit the Big Island really hard, really fast, and which remains here on the Big Island. And so, similar initiatives are going to continue to go in terms of around food insecurity. And I suspect that'll be happening on the Big Island for at least a year, if not longer, right? Because the Big Island depends so much on tourism, and we haven't had tourists here since March, and so in the early days the unemployment rate was 40 to 50% here on the Big Island. It's stabilized a bit more, but it's going to have severe impacts. In terms of community gardens and whatnot, I don't know of anything specific. I'll encourage anybody who wants to speak up. But we have, I think the answer that I gave, but people may not have seen in Slack, so I'll restate it here, is that Farms to Families did two things. It immediately addressed food insecurity, but it really helped build up the network of organizations that are trying to look at food insecurity, issues around increased poverty and just general community engagement, where there were a lot of separate things on the Big Island that have been there for many, many years, but which are now much more integrated as a result of what's been happening with COVID. So that's going to be, I think, the true long-term benefit, is that a lot of these groups now know each other very well, are going to be able to deploy resources better. Right after Farms to Families ended, a big amount of cash was infused from the CARES Act. But now that that network is in place, we're able to distribute those resources around a lot better, know where the hurt points are, and able to get them to them faster. But in terms of Keck leading that initiative, Farms to Families was a Keck initiative. In terms of Keck leading that initiative, we've ramped that off and are trying to plug ourselves in more to these networks for the long term. So I don't know about specific things like community gardens, but there's a whole lot going on right now, Carrie. And that's been one of the upsides to COVID. It's one of the few upsides to COVID is building stronger networks here on the island.
Okay, thanks.
Mm-hmm. If I don't see any more hands, I'm just going to keep asking Brad to ask questions.
So I have a question about the diversity and inclusion program.
Yeah.
So Hilton specifically mentioned, because we're wrestling with the same issue, which is that, our professional staff has demographics that have never looked like the state of California. And you folks have the same issue, which is that traditionally your professional staff are people hired from the mainland with, professional backgrounds. So how are you going to attempt to address that?
I think it's a very complex, difficult problem, Brad. And it's going to sound like a dodge, but we just started this. That said, there are a number of observatories, and we're part of the Mauna Kea Observatories Collaborative here that have, and one of the observatories in particular, East Asian Observatory, has had some great success with doing internships and apprenticeships, and more importantly, the apprenticeships on the island, because an internship, you're there for a few months or something like that, but apprenticeships, you're actively integrating people and stuff. And we're looking very closely at things like that as part of the initiative. And then we're also trying to elevate leadership amongst Kama'aina. So Native Hawaiians and people who have long-term residents or born on the island, looking at staff that are already in the observatory networks that are Kama'aina, but grooming the leadership possibilities and enabling the leadership possibilities for those folks. That's going to be another big part of this, because we have to, have people in positions of leadership. It's not enough to have just, the low-level positions and perhaps an occasional token top person. You need to have integration through all levels. It's very early days, but I think that the key point with what Hilton was trying to convey there is that this is moving from something that we've always been interested in to an actual serious strategic initiative with resources behind it at the observatory. And our new HR director, as Hilton mentioned, this is going to be the thrust of his job as a major initiative for here at the observatory. So it's early days. I can't give you a lot of specifics on how we're going to go after this, Brad, but we're taking it very, very seriously for obvious reasons. So I'm really glad we're doing it, and just watch this space. And more importantly, feel free to hold us accountable years down the line.
My organization is not doing any better, so I'm not going to.
Sherry, I saw you join. We're just asking any of the Keck staff to say hello and say what they do here at Keck, and then I'll go back to Jessica for the next question.
Oh, hi, I'm Sherry, one of the staff astronomers at Keck. I've supported a lot of you. Yep, and now I actually support all the Keck instruments. So for Alvarez users, you'll see me more often from now on. All right, I'll hand the floor back to John.
Okay. Jessica, you've got a hand up.
Yeah, I was wondering about, when Hilton said anticipate another 6 months, maybe to a year of this kind of observing in operations mode. It's just a bit of a shock. What can we do to keep the community connected? I mean, that's always been one of Keck's greatest strengths, is how we talk to each other and teach informally and all of those things. I started this Keck community Slack. Is that the right thing to do? Do we have a big shared Google Drive? Yeah. What are things like that we can do?
That's a really, really good question. And I'm going to give you a very unsatisfying answer now, Jessica, but when this started in March, as I'm sure it was the case for everybody on the call, you kind of went into this panic crisis mode of how do I enable the ability to do anything? And so the organization put all of its resources. All right, how do we get back on Sky? How do we get the instruments up there safely? How do we re-enable observing? And then once we got that going, now we're in the position 6 months later when we've reached this sort of equilibrium. It's potentially an unstable one. If cases explode on the island, it goes back into shutdown. But we're now in the place with this equilibrium to actually start to address both internally and externally how do we not just make this work, but how do we make this work significantly better? And a big part of that is how do we engage with, I agree with you, how do we engage with the community? Right now it's difficult because it's a problem on both sides. The community's still trying to deal with all this. And so, sometimes the last thing on their mind is full prep for that observing run. Sometimes it's, how do I have my kids at home going to school? How do I do this, and this? Oh, and stay up all night. So I think it's an evolving thing where we're kind of having to work together. There are multiple pieces that I think the Slack channel is a good idea. I'm going to take a very serious look at how well this meeting worked from not just did we get the science forward perspective, but how well did it work to have these multiple Slack channels where you could actually have a video call on them, talk to people real quick. Is there things we can do on the Keck community Slack side, or just leverage some of these technologies in other ways? We've upped our public talks and put them on, Facebook Live and stuff like that. But it's a really good question. I think there's ways technologically we can look at it. Internally, we need to move around some of the committees that were immediately made in COVID and all the work to get us back. Some of those people need to go back and focus on questions like this, and we're going to be doing that in the near term. So I don't have a good answer for you now, but I'm gaining some hope based off of how this meeting is running, that there's ways we can have a lot of engagement. And I'll invite anybody from the Keck staff. I keep commanding the conversation. I feel bad about that. So if any of the other Keck staff want to jump in. Randy, I know you think about this a lot in terms of doing things. Randy's one of the heads of our COVID response team, so he thinks about this a lot too.
Yeah, and we definitely want to promote the communication as much as possible. I think also that we can develop these relationships, these working relationships, more through finding new ways to advance projects and science collaboratives and things like that have been a little bit on hold due to the crisis. And once people find ways to work together on these things, that will also help tie us together. So side projects and side science papers and things like that, these meetings are certainly going to be useful, but every possible way that we can work around the lack of physical togetherness is going to be welcome.
So if you have suggestions, send them. Oh, sorry, Jim.
I was going to say, I think we also have to acknowledge that it's going to be hard to include new people in these ways, because if you if you've never met somebody before, it's very hard to meet over Zoom and work out the working relationship and how's the best way to communicate with this person, how's the best way to collaborate. And so I think we just have to be aware of that, that'll be an additional challenge as we, you know, for people that we don't have an established relationship. I mean, it's one thing for Jessica, for you to send me an email and say, hey, we need to think about X, Y, and Z. But it's different than if it's, you know, a first-year student who's from some other university who doesn't know who do I even talk to, you know, how do I communicate these things? And so that, I think we just have to recognize that there's going to be that challenge as well.
So let me jump in and inject a little bit of optimism here, which is that let's turn this around and look at what we are doing better right now. It is way easier for someone new to the Keck community to jump in on this meeting, be they a grad student who's not at a member institution or whatever. Same for observing. We can now set up observers from any place as long as they're a member of a team that has Keck time. When before that might have been a barrier, they might have had to take a 6-hour flight to someplace and set up a hotel room, which maybe they didn't have funding for. So there are opportunities in the way things are right now to include people more easily, because the boundaries to being in on either an observing run or a meeting like this are lower than they were prior to COVID.
Imka, did you want to?
Yeah, so I was wondering, I mean, you can try to increase indeed communication and togetherness, but this is happening everywhere and people are on Zoom, I mean, 10, 12 hours a day. And I mean, personally, I just get burned out and I'm not even looking at meetings or talks anymore because I'm already on this Zoom so much. So I just don't know how you can really find a way to have this togetherness, because it has to be over Zoom. I mean, I must admit, Slack channels, I haven't managed to get in that yet, with calling. But so I think it's a problem, and I mean, I really hope things go back to the old ways, maybe because I'm old, but it's, I definitely prefer that.
I will say I've heard a lot of people complain about Zoom fatigue. Every single one is in a fairly senior position and spends their days in meetings. More junior people have not complained to me about that.
That's interesting.
I suspect the floor is about ready to erupt from junior people saying we're really sick of Zoom too, Josh. I see Carrie already nodding her head. Taylor's got the head nod going. Let's see, Carrie, do you have your hand up?
Yes. Yeah, one thing we have done, which was kind of a in-between step, was for one of our REU summer school programs that we ran at Sierra, we had poster sessions and we used Mozilla Hubs, which was quite fun and a bit different, but basically it was in the virtual, in a virtual environment. But when you logged into the room, you chose a little avatar, and it was kind of like in this game format that you could move your little avatar around. And as you got close to other avatars, you could start hearing what they were saying. So we had set up a poster room for the students in that sense. So it was still a virtual environment, but it gave some sort of interaction to it, since that you could actually, you've virtually walked up to the poster and you got to hear the conversations that were happening around that poster, where if you walked away from the poster, you would no longer hear those people and you would hear the people from another poster if you walked up to that one. So that was quite a nice experience and kind of an intermediate way. I think nothing is going to beat the in-person interactions that we can do. And I am very tired of Zoom. But that was at least something that was kind of a nice in-between, and it was something different, and it gave a bit of more of a a personal, like if you're actually interacting with people more than just being completely virtual, which was quite nice.
Kelly, if you could do me a favor and just shoot me an email with a link to the technology you just referenced so that I can take a look at it.
John, I posted on the chat, the
Oh,
Zoom chat.
Great, thank you, Jessica. I see that John Pelletier has joined. So John, we're asking all the Keck folks to just unmute and say who you are, what you do.
Hey, I'm John. I'm one of the OAs. I've been here for about 4.5 years, so I know a lot of people on here. Yeah.
Imka, is your hand still up? You have another question, or?
No, I didn't know my hand was still up. I guess I have to take it down myself, right?
Yeah.
Okay. There it goes.
Anything else that the Keck staff wants to throw in on this question? Carlos.
Yeah, I was gonna say a little bit also going back to the essay perspective of doing all these at home observing. So for me, one of the treats of working at Keck has always been to have the possibility to meet the observing community in person. I know that we are tending to go more to, even before the COVID, we tended to go more and more to remote observing. But having people coming to observe to Waimea and being able to interact with them in person and to chat about what they are doing, I think that is really a great experience, or at least it has been a great experience for me, coming from a previous observatory in which we did all the observations in Q mode. So the way I see Zoom and all these very nice tools to kind of as a replacement for that real interaction between people, I'm also kind of the opinion that I'm hoping that this is, kind of a transition period, and that maybe, in a year from now or whenever, we are going to go back to something that resembles what we had before, and we'll keep having people coming to observe here to Waimea. I think that is irreplaceable.
Yeah, we want folks back.
That's great, because I do want to go back.
Yeah, no, we like I said, once we can have people back, we will have people back. I think, the situation on the Big Island has to stabilize, the situation in Hawaii has to stabilize, and on the mainland it has to stabilize for us to lower the risk level to allow folks back in. Hilton put out 6 months to a year. I think that estimate is based off of, he was the one who, when this started, said it's going to be this way for at least 6 months. And I said, nonsense, it's only going to be this way for 6 weeks. And it turns out we're entering month 7 fairly soon. So I guess that's why, he's the director. So, because he's got a pretty good sense on this. Wide range availability of a vaccine will certainly help. But right now it's too early for us to be able to have folks come in and that's just a,
yeah, I wouldn't want to fly now either. I mean, I'd rather first see that vaccine and then go and step in an airplane.
So Taylor, you asked, have the weekly essay coffees been happening still? They are on the calendar for every day at 2 p.m. So we jump in on the Zoom, we have that coffee.
That's awesome.
Now, sometimes it's just me and Josh going, where the heck is everybody? But it's an excuse for me to have my 6th espresso of the day. So, hey.
I mean, that happened in person too sometimes, though. It's just y'all.
John, I had a comment on the diversity question earlier that since there's a lull here. And one way that we have been trying to address it over the years is by developing our own workforce through hiring locals and then training them. It's harder, obviously, to get them up to the positions that require a PhD in certain professional and highly technical things, but we've been pretty successful in doing that, and that is one thing that we hope to do more of, and to have workforce development within the community and within the state to better represent the demographics here. And so I would imagine that's going to be one of the aspects of what we strengthen as we go forward.
Actually, I'll throw in one other thing on that topic. We've actually been thinking about it in the SA group for a little while. Going back to when Ann Kinney was chief scientist, she put some work into crafting the job ad for an essay back when she was chief scientist. And that, I think that particular ad had a fairly gender diverse set of applicants. So that worked out well. And then even on the most recent cycles, we specifically tweaked the job ad with this in mind based on some common advice that's out there. So we've been doing things like within the SA group just to work on this issue a little bit.
I think the only other thing I'd add about it is that we don't presume at the management level to be experts on DEI issues, which is why we're bringing in pros on this. Our new HR director has a significantly more experience than most folks here at the organization. So it's one thing to say we've got a diversity pledge. It's another thing to execute it, and it's a third thing to maintain it. And so we're committed to all three of those, and we'll put the resources where needed on it. No other questions? People wrecked for the day? Sounds like it. We were almost at the end of the hour. Oh no, Casey, you have a hand up.
Yeah, I actually am kind of curious what the essays do. Like, I know when stuff is broken when I'm observing, it's like, help, please. But, do you support all these different instruments? Do you also have time to work on your own science that you're interested in or things like that?
Who wants to jump in? Elena works on boring exoplanet stuff. We don't want to talk about that, but
Boring. No, you don't know. I know that at the end of the day, it's because you want to do exoplanets. So if you want to do exoplanets, I can help you.
Yeah. So do folks want to chime in with some of the other things that they do in science things, or some of the other parts of the responsibility of the SA position?
I'll make a general comment, and that is that as a staff astronomer, you get exposed to all these different science programs, and you get to know some of the different PIs and the different researchers who come through the Keck system. And as you get to know the science and the individuals, you get more and more interested in some of these things, and you eventually become a collaborator. And that certainly happened to me on a couple of different cases. And so you can expand your scientific scope quite a bit through a position like this, and go in directions that you never would have otherwise, probably. So that's one aspect of the career that's very satisfying, is that you get to try new things and learn new things and go in new directions. So
I'll jump in a little bit. I mean, it's extremely, so nominally we have 20% of our time dedicated to research. It's extremely challenging in reality to realize that 20%. There's always many things to be done, many fires to put out. And those that succeed generally have good, solid collaborations. I will say that, anyone who goes into a job like this has to really enjoy some of the operational aspects, whether it's tinkering with the innards of Demos like Carlos does, or you know, getting into some of the software stuff like I do, you know, sometimes those are the fun things too. So it's a challenge, and we actually, you know, talk a lot in the SA group about how to maximize the return from that 20% science time. But it varies a lot as to how successful people are at that.
I think the visiting scholar program helps as well. That's my personal experience. And like Josh said, I find it challenging to really maximize the 20% research time. So the way I manage this is I don't really lead programs now, but I would contribute specific little chunk of work with my collaborators, and then because most of them have an army of students and postdocs, and so I just have to contribute a tiny part of my part, and then they can do the rest. But that's pretty cool too.
Yeah, so let me make another comment that we, from our side, love to just work with all of you, in particular using our Twilight program, which was developed by visiting scholars. And I know Carlos is helping a lot. He's one of our main helpers there. But we love to just work together with all the SAs and OAs to just get that working and indeed contribute images that way. I mean, the ones that we have gotten, we have published 2 papers based upon such data, and we are working on a third one, we hope soon. So from the scientist perspective, that is, yeah, there it is. So it's really a great program. And for example, one little thing right now is Neptune. You see this really boring picture. Normally we see lots and lots of clouds on Neptune. And so what we think is really interesting and exciting is that we do not see much on Neptune. So that is something that we hope to work on soon. I don't know if Carlos wants to jump in here too.
Yeah, I couldn't help but throw this up here because it was an interesting night earlier in September where a little mini tour of the solar system was happening in the Twilight program.
Right, right.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing that I would add is that for me, you know, I've always been interested in the solar system. I think it's something it is a lot of fun, but my career as an astrophysicist went in kind of a different direction. You know, I did my PhD and my postdoc in star formation, which is also a great topic, and I really enjoyed that time. But for me, coming to Keck and participating in this Twilight observing program has been an opportunity to be a little bit closer to this type of solar system science that I'm interested in. And I also want to say that regarding getting that 20% of science, I think for me I would say that it's almost impossible to get to that level. So participating in this project at a smaller level, you know, like helping getting the data where they need to go, or helping taking the data, or sometimes even helping producing some data, or these kind of things are the way that I get to get to that 20%, or trying to get to that 20% of science time. But the other thing that is a little bit, you know, is kind of something that is typical of this job, is that it might depend a lot on what other things are going on at the observatory, or what you are involved on from the point of view of operations or upgrades. And that will really drive how much time you can have to do your own research. So, you know, it's suddenly for a year or a year and a half or a few months, you are in the middle of an upgrade to the instrument that you are responsible with. You know that during that period of time, most of your time, if not all, is going to go to that. And then you won't have as much time to spend in doing research. But then you might have other periods. It kind of comes and goes depending on what your involvement is on different projects. And then you might have another period in which you are a little bit less busy with support work, and then you can spend more time trying to do research. But it's true that what Sherry was saying, that trying to lead a project, being staff astronomer at any observatory, I would say, I mean, this is not just Keck, it's any observatory is difficult, trying to lead a science project. But all the opportunities that you have to work on, on different things, that's great. That's one of the nice things about this job, that you don't have to focus on something very specific for your career, but you can kind of pick out things and do things that you find interesting and help other people achieve their scientific goals on those topics that you are particularly interested in.
So folks, unfortunately, I have to jump off because I'm 3 minutes late for another Zoom meeting, because, I want to make sure that I get as much Zoom in my life as possible. But feel free to continue the conversation, and I look forward to seeing everyone tomorrow. So don't leave just because I'm leaving, but I'm gonna head off and maybe have somebody else from the Keck crew run the show. So thank you, everyone.
Thanks, John. I have to go to another one too, so.
Well, then should we just go ahead and call it to a close? I didn't mean to completely shut it down, but it's been a pretty long day, so everybody's probably tired. I'm seeing some nodding. All right, fine. I'll make a management level decision. Call this to a close. But thank everybody for participating, and make sure to come tomorrow, and I'll continue to plug, bounce around those posters, talk to some people that, doing some science you may not even know is cool yet. So, because we've got a lot of folks in poster sessions that would love to hear from you. So we'll see everybody tomorrow, and thanks again for joining us.
Thank you, John.
Thanks, bye.
Bye. Thanks, everybody.
Bye-bye.